invisible fairy people that live in the sky, you couldn't talk about Jesus or God without bringing up the devil, like the Bible does. Um, so now today we're going to talk about the devil, who's got different names. Basically, the devil is also known as Lucifer. He's also known as Beelzebub, and whatever different names that he could be called um, throughout different religions. Um, Now, the devil is a mythical personification of evil, as it is conceived in various cultures and religious traditions. Now, it's seen as the objectification of a hostile and destructive force. Now, Jeffrey Burton Russell states that the different conceptions of the devil can be summed up as one, a principle of evil, um, of independent from God, two, an aspect of God, and three, a created being that turned evil, a fallen angel like Lucifer, or four, a symbol of human evil. Um, and yes, this is actually kind of odd. There actually is a statue of a devil that's located in the Devil's Museum in Lithuania, and here's what the thing looks like. Kind of odd and creepy looking, but yeah. So, and throughout the years, the devil has been um, has been created by with different things in mind. Each tradition, culture, and religion with the devil and its mythos offers a different lens on manifestations of evil. Now, the history of these perspectives intertwine with theology, mythology, psychiatry, art, and literature, um, developing independently within each of the traditions, and it occurs historically in many contexts and cultures, and is given many different names like Satan in Judaism, Lucifer in Christianity, um, Beelzebub in Judeo-Christian mythology, um, uh, um, Mephistopheles in German, Iblis in Islam, and its attributes, and it attributes that it is portrayed as blue, black, or red, preferably in red. But it is portrayed as having horns on its head and without horns, and so on. Um, Now, the modern English word devil derives from the Middle English word devil, D-E-B-E-L, from the Old English diaphol, and that in turn represents an early Germanic borrowing of the Latin diabolos. Um, so this in turn was borrowed from the Greek diabolos, meaning to slander, and and it goes across into hurl and probably akin to the Sanskrit Gurit, which means he looks up. Now, so in his book, The Devil, Perceptions of Evil from Antiquity to Primitive Christianity, Jeffrey Burton Russell discusses various meanings and difficulties that are encountered when you bring up and use the word devil. He does not claim to define the word in the general sense, but he describes the limited use that he intends for the word in his book, limited in order to minimize this difficulty and for the sake of clarity. Um, now in this book, Russell uses the word devil as the personification of evil found in a variety of different cultures, as opposed to the word Satan, which he reserves specifically for the figure in the Abrahamic religions. Um, John Bonatane describes the devil as a mythic explanation model and a form of a personified supernatural power for death, disease, and everything hostile to humanity. Um, in the introduction to his book, Satan, a Biography, Henry Kelly discusses various considerations and meanings that he has encountered in using terms such as devil and Satan, and etc. While not offering a general definition, he describes it in his book. Whenever Diabolos is used as the proper name of Satan, he signals it by using small capital words. Um, now, if you ever looked at the Oxford English Dictionary, It has a variety of definitions for the meaning of double, supported by a range of different citations. Double can refer to Satan, the supreme spirit of evil, or one of Satan's emissaries or demons that populate hell, or to one of the spirits that possesses a demonic person. Double may refer to one of the malignant deities that's feared and worshipped by heathen people. Um, a demon, a malignant being of superhuman powers. Figuratively, double may be applied to a wicked person, or playfully to a rogue or rascal, or an empathy often accompanied by the word poor to person, meaning poor double. Um, now, Now, most early belief systems had no unifying concept of evil, but in the oldest available records, evil is part of nature. In Mesopotamia, evil is sometimes said to derive from primordial chaos. Um, but there are no inherently evil demons or devils at that time. Various spirits and deities could do both good and evil depending on a whim. Now, the oldest known Egyptian beliefs had no evil deities, but the gods who were morally ambivalent and required to submit to the divine order of the cosmos, evil being an action violating said harmony. In old Hindu beliefs, deities reflecting the supreme reality are both benevolent and fierce. Even in the Old Testament, the evil and hence devilish characteristics are an expression of Yahweh's wrath. Yahweh being another name for Jesus, or God, or whatever you want to describe it as. Now, among ancient Middle Eastern beliefs, Zoroastrianism was the first institutionalized belief system which developed a clear demonology headed by a supreme spirit of evil, um, i.e., being the devil. Um, okay, so around the year 600 BC, Zarathustra had urged his followers to turn away from the devas in favor of dedicating worship to Mazda alone. Um, Unique to Zarathustra's revelation was that he claimed that evil is not part of the Godhead or ultimate reality, but a separate principle independent from God. Um, for the formulation of good and evil as entirely separate principles, Zarathustra argued that the god Ahura Mazda freely chooses goodness, while Angra freely chooses evil. By doing this, he established the first known dualistic cosmological system, which would later influence other religions, including Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and it's alienated from the new soul deity. The spirits of previous belief systems thus became associated with the forces of evil, and hence demons. Um, as servants of the destructive spirit, the demons were believed to follow only evil, inflicting pain and causing destruction. Unfortunate souls who find themselves in the domain of the evil spirits after death, i.e., in hell, are all tortured by the demons. But spirits found to align with the new soul deity then became the good head servants, i.e., meaning angels. Um, now, thus the originally monastic Canaanite form of Judaism absorbs parts of Persian dualistic tendencies during the post-exilic period. Now, however, Second Temple Judaism and later Christianity differ from Persian dualism in some regards. Now, the proposed omnipotence of God of the former does not allow for a radical dualism as proposed by Zoroastrianism and later Manichaeism. Now, Manichaeism. I'm not sure if I'm saying that one right. Judeo-Christian tradition differs from earlier monastic beliefs by limiting the power of their godhead through an evil principle or force introduced by Zoroastrianism. Now, Christianity in particular struggled with reconciling God's omnipresence with God's benevolence. Now, while Zoroastrianism sacrificed God's omnipotence for God's benevolence, thus giving rise to a principle devil is independent from God, now Christianity mostly insisted on the devil being created and mildly dependent on God. So, um, One way that Christianity addressed the problem of evil was by distinguishing between mind and body, and it's an ideal that's inherited from Greek Platonism. Now, similar to Zoroastrianism, Platonism was dualistic. Now, however, Platonism and Christianity differ from Persian dualism insofar as that they are associated with goodness only with spirit and evil with matter, proposing a form of mind-body dualism. According to Plato, God is like a craftsman who builds the best possible world that he could envision. Now, however, God has to abide by the laws of nature and can only work with the material that's presented to him. Um, Now, matter thus becomes the refractionary element in Plato and later Neoplatonic models of the cosmos, resisting the perfection that God originally intended. Now, in religious beliefs, applying such theories of evil, matter, and it becomes a sphere of lack of goodness and transforms matter into the devilish principle par excellence. Now, here's a picture of an angel who they believe could be the devil because of his color. This is an excerpt from a Byzantine mosaic image. A blue angel, probably representing a devil, standing by goats in the early 6th century. And you can get a closer look at that. Yep. So now, according to Neoplatonic cosmology, evil or matter, it results from a lack of goodness. The good spirit at the center gives rise to several emanations, each decreasing in goodness and increasing in deficiency. Now, thus in Christianity, following the privation theory of the Neoplatonists, the devil became the principle for the thing most remote from God. Details were worked out by Christian scholars such as Pseudo Dionysius, the Areopagite, and John of Damascus, who argued that evil is merely a lack or removal of goodness. As such, the devil was conceptualized as a fallen angel, which means the main fallen angel would be Lucifer, being brought forth as good first, but then turned evil by abandoning goodness. John of Damascus used the privation theory to combat dualistic approaches to evil. Similar rebuttals were written by Augustine of Hippo. Um, Now, the possibly strongest form of body-mind dualism and a radical step back towards absolute dualism, as conceptualized early in Zoroastrianism, was reestablished. Um, um, Manichaeism was a major religion. It was founded in the 3rd century AD by the Parthian prophet Mani, who was dated between 216 and 274 AD in the Sasanian Empire, which I have a video that I'm going to put up on that in the next few weeks. Now, one of its key concepts is the doctrine of 2 principles and 3 moments. The world would be described as resulting from a past moment in which 2 principles, good and evil, are separate. A contemporary moment in which both principles are mixed due to an assault of the world of darkness on the realm of light, and a future moment when both principles are distinct forever. Um, and here's a picture of the devil supposedly riding on horseback. This is from the Nuremberg Chronicle of 1493. Now, due to Christian dualistic monotheism, non-Christian deities became associated with demons. Ephesians 6:12 stating our struggles is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Inspired early Christians to think of themselves on a mission to drive out demons. By the 4th century, most Christians took it for granted that the Greek pagans worshipped demons and thus belonged to the realm of the spiritually impure. In the 2nd century, Justin Martyr already conceptualized the pagan deities as demons responsible for persecution of Christians. Now, by the end of the 6th century, Mediterranean society widely identified themselves as unequivocally Christian, with an exception to Jews. The last recorded worship of another non-Christian deity is dated back to the 570. Tatian considered the pagan gods to be under the power of fate. The demons, spirits of the Greeks, thus became the demons of the Christians' belief system under the leadership of Zeus, whom they equated with the he-devil, i.e., the leader of the foreign spirits. The Christians, however, would have broken free from the influence of the gods of the Greek pantheon, and thus also free from the fetters of fate and the law. Um, Now, abstract notions of the double, such as regarding evil as the mere absence of good, they were far too subtle to be embraced by most theologians during the early Middle Ages, but instead, they sought the more concrete image of the devil to represent spiritual struggle and pain. Thus, the devil became more of a concrete entity. From the fourth to the 12th century, Christian ideas combined with European pagan beliefs created a vivid folklore about the devil, and many German folk tales that deceived giants of pagan tales are substituted by a devil. For example, the devil builds a bridge in exchange for the first passing being's soul. Then people let a dog pass the bridge first, and the devil is cheated. At the same time, magical rites calling upon pagan deities were replaced by references to Jesus Christ. Um, Now, cosmological dualism underwent a revival in the 12th century through Carthusianism. Now, probably influenced by Bogomilism in the 12th century. What is known of the Cathars largely comes in what is preserved by the critics in the Catholic Church, which later destroyed them in the Albigensian Crusade. That'll be something to look up too. Okay. And they accused the Cathars of believing in more than one god, one of light and one of darkness. Duran de Huska, responding to a Cathar tract of 1220, indicates that they regarded the physical world as the creation of Satan. Um, in the Gospel of the Secret Supper, Lucifer, just as in prior Gnostic systems, appears as an evil demiurge who created the material world and traps souls inside. Bogomilism owed many ideals to the earlier Polynesians in Armenia and the Near East, and had strong impact on the history of the Balkans. Now, their true origin probably lies within earlier sects such as Nestorianism, also Marcionism, and Borborism. Not sure if I said any of those words right. Now, who all share the notion of Jesus, of a docetic Jesus. Like these earlier movements, Bogomilites agree upon the dualism between body and soul, matter and spirit, and they struggle between good and evil. Now, here's a picture of what they are supposed to be: God and Lucifer. This right here, God is supposed to be on top, and Lucifer on the bottom. And then down here, you got Satan the dragon on the left gives to the beast of the sea on the right power represented by a scepter and a detailed panel on the medieval French apocalypse tapestry, and that was produced between 1377 and 1382. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. I accidentally hit something. Okay, so, let's see if this is turned up all the way. I don't know if you guys could hear me at all. I had to turn my volume up. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Now, the Catholic Church sanctioned dualistic teachings in the Fourth Council of the Lateran back in 1215. Now, By affirming that God created everything from nothing, and that the devil and his demons were created good, but turned evil by their own will, that humans yielded to the devil's temptations, thus fallen into sin, and that after the resurrection, the damned will suffer along with the devil, while the saved while the saved will enjoy eternity with Christ. Only a few theologians from the University of Paris in 1241 proposed the contrary assertion that God created the devil evil and without his own decision. Um, after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, parts of Bogomil dualism remained in Balkan folklore concerning creation, according to a story dated back to the 11th between the 11th and the 13th century. Before God created the world, he meets a goose on the eternal ocean. The name of the goose is reportedly another name for Satan, Satanel, and it claims to be a god. When God asks Satanel who he is, the devil answers, the God of gods. And God requests that the devil then dive to the bottom of the sea to carry some mud, and from this mud they fashioned the world. God created his fiery angels from the right part of the flint rock, and the devil created his demons from the left part of the flint. Now later, the devil tries to assault God, but is thrown into the abyss. He remains lurking on the creation of God and planning another attack on heaven, but this myth shares some resemblance with pre-Islamic Turkic creation myths, as well as Bogomolite thoughts. Um, Now, the story bears a similar resemblance to Mongolian cosmologies. Now, according to one myth found among the Siberian Tartars, God and his first creation are envisioned in the form of ducks. Now, God asks his creature and companion to dive into the ocean to retrieve some earth. However, the second duck, identified with Erlik Khan, turns against God and becomes his rival. Now, a similar legend is recorded among the Turks. Erlik and God swam together over the primordial waters. When God was about to create the earth, he sent Erlik to dive into the waters and collect some mud. Erlik hid some inside his milk to later create his own world, but when God commanded the earth to expand, Eric got troubled by the mud in his mouth. God aided Erlik to spit it out, and the mud carried by Erlik gave place to the unpleasant areas of the world. Because of his sin, he was assigned to evil, and since he claimed equality with God by creating his own world, God punishes Erlik Khan by granting him his own kingdom in the underworld. But in one variant that's recorded by Verbitsky Vasily, not only Erlik Khan, but also the spirits he created were banished from the heavens and cast down into the lower realms to live with him. Um, Now, in Christianity, the devil or Satan is a fallen angel who is the primary opponent of God. Some Christians are considered the Roman and Greek deities to be devils. Um, Now, Christianity describes Satan as a fallen angel who terrorizes the world through evil as opposed to truth, and shall be condemned together with the fallen angels who follow him to eternal fire at the last judgment. Now, when it comes to fallen angels, the most common one that people know is Lucifer. Um, Now, if you read the Bible, then you would know what I'm talking about here. The devil is identified with several figures in the Bible, including the serpent in the Garden of in the Garden of Eden. That's when he tricked Adam and Eve into eating the apple, and that's what got them banished from the Garden of Evil. Um, Satan, the tempter of the Gospels, um, Leath- um, Leviathan, and the dragon in the Book of Revelation. Now, some parts of the Bible, which do not refer to an evil spirit or Satan at the time of the composition of the text, are interpreted as references to the devil in Christian tradition. Genesis 3 mentions the serpent in the Garden of Eden, which he tricks Adam and Eve into eating the forbidden fruits from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thus causing them to be expelled from the garden. Um, Excuse me. Um, the Babylonian myth of a rising star as the embodiment of a heavenly being who is stoned down for his attempt to ascend into the higher planes of the gods is also found in the Bible, interpreted as a fallen angel, which was stated in Isaiah 14:12. Um, Ezekiel's cherub in Eden is thought to be a description of the major characteristic of the devil, that he was created good as a high-ranking angel and lived in Eden, later turning evil on his own accord. A fresco. Now, you also have now we got a fresco. This is a fresco detail from the Rita Monastery, in which demons are depicted as having grotesque face and bodies. You can see this picture. And here's the horns of a goat and ram, goat's fur and ears, nose, and the canines of a pig. And you can see like those different pictures. Now, Ezekiel's cherub in Eden is thought to be a description of the major characteristic of the devil, and that he was created good as a high-ranking angel and lived in Eden, later turning evil on his own accord. Now, if you were in Eden, in the garden of God, every precious stone adorned you, like ruby, topaz, emerald, chrysolite, onyx, jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and beryl, and these were all mentioned in the Bible. Gold work of tambourines and of pipes was in you, and the day that you were created they were prepared, and you were the anointed cherub who covers, and I set you, so that you were on the holy mountain of God. You had walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire, and you were perfect in your own ways from the day that you were created until unrighteousness was found in you. And this was mentioned in Ezekiel 28:13. Now the Hebrew term Satan was originally a common noun meaning accuser or adversary, and derived from a verb meaning primarily to obstruct and oppose. Satan is conceptualized as a heavenly being hostile to humans and a personification of evil 18 times in Job 1 through 2, and Zechariah 3. In the book of Job is a righteous man who is favored by God. Job 1 describes the sons of God presenting themselves before God. Satan thinks Job only loves God because he has been blessed, so he requests that God tests the sincerity of Job's love for God through suffering and expecting Job to abandon his faith. But God consents. Satan destroys Job's family, health, servants, and flocks, and yet Job refuses to condemn God. Now the devil figures much more prominently in the New Testament and in Christian theology, and then in the Old Testament. Now the devil is a unique entity throughout the New Testament, neither identical to the demons nor the fallen angels, the tempter and perhaps rulers over the kingdom of earth. Now the temptation of Christ, Matthew 4:8 and 4, Matthew's 4:8 and 9, and Luke 4:6-7, the devil offers all kingdoms of the earth to Jesus, implying that they belong to him. Since Jesus does not dispute this offer, it may indicate that the authors of those Gospels believed this to be true. Now, this event is described in all three synoptic Gospels, Matthew 4:1 through 11, and Mark 1:12-13, and Luke 4:1 through 13. Some church fathers, such as Irenaeus, reject that the devil holds such power, arguing that since the devil was a liar since the beginning, he also lied here, and that all kingdoms belong to God, referring to Proverbs 21. Adversaries of Jesus are suggested to be under the influence of the devil. John 8:40 speaks about the Pharisees as the offspring of the devil. John 13:2 states that the devil entered Judas Iscariot before Judas's betrayal. Luke 22:3, and all three synoptic Gospels, Matthew 9:22 through 29, and Mark 3:22-30, and Luke 11:14-20. Jesus himself was also accused of serving the devil, which he didn't, supposedly. Jesus' adversaries claim that he receives the power to cast out demons from Beelzebub. The devil, in response, Jesus says that a house divided against itself will fall, and that there would be no reason for the devil to allow one to defeat the devil's works with his own power. Um, According to the first epistle of Peter, like a roaring lion, your adversary, the devil, prowls around looking for someone to devour. The authors of the second epistle of Peter and the epistle of Jude believe that God prepares judgment for the devil and his fellow fallen angels, who are bound in darkness until the divine retribution. In the epistle to the Romans, the inspirer of sin is also implied to be the author of death. Now, the epistle to the Hebrews speaks of the devil as the one who has the power of death, but is defeated through the death of Jesus. That's in Hebrews 2:14. And the second epistle to the Corinthians, Paul the apostle warns that Satan is often disguised as an angel of light. In the book of Revelation, a dragon serpent called the devil or Satan wages war against the archangel Michael, resulting in the dragon's fall. The devil is described with future similar to primordial chaos monsters like the Leviathan in the Old Testament. Now, the identification of the serpent as Satan supports identification of the serpent in Genesis with the devil. Now, Christian theology, the devil is the personification of evil, traditionally held to have rebelled against God in an attempt to become equal to God himself. He is said to be a fallen angel who was expelled from heaven at the beginning of time and before God created the material world, and is in constant opposition to God. Many scholars explain the devil from the devil's fall when God's grace in Neoplatonic fashion. According to Origen, God created rational creatures first in the material world. The rational creatures are divided into angels and humans, both endowed with free will. And the material world is a result of their evil choices. Therefore, the devil is considered most remote from the presence of God, and those who adhere to the devils will follow the devil's removal from God's presence. And we do got a troll on the channel. He could go. The troll that's on my channel can go fuck himself. Now, similar pseudo Dionysus, the arrow Paget considers evil as a deficiency having no real ontological existence. Now, thus the devil is conceptualized as the entity most remote from God. Dante's Inferno follows a similar portrayal of the devil by placing him at the bottom of hell, where he becomes the center of the material and simple world to which all simpleness is drawn. Now, from the beginning of the early modern period around the 1400s, Christians started to imagine the devil as an increasingly powerful entity, actively leading people into falsehood. For Martin Luther, the devil was not a deficit of good, but a real personal and powerful entity. With a presumptuous will against God, His world, and His creation, Martin Luther lists several hosts of greater and lesser devils. Greater devils would incite to greater sins like unbelief and heresy, while lesser devils into minor sins like greed and fornication. Now among these devils appears Asmodeus, known from the book of Tobit. These anthropomorphic devils are used as stylistic devices for his audience. Now, although Martin Luther regards them as different manifestations of one spirit, i.e., meaning the devil. Now, others rejected that the devil has an independent reality on his own. David Joris was the first of the Anabaptists to suggest the devil was only an allegory. 1540. This view found a small but persistent following in the Netherlands. Now, the devil as a fallen angel symbolized Adam's fall from God's grace, and Satan represented a power within man. Rudolf Bultmann taught that Christians needed to reject belief in a literal devil as part of formulating an authentic faith in today's world. Now, when it comes to Gnostic influenced religions, they postulate the idea that the material world is inherently evil. The one true God is remote beyond the material universe. Now, therefore, this universe must be governed by an inferior impostor deity. This deity was identified with the deity of the Old Testament by some sects, such as the Scythians and the Marcians. And they basically Marcion's Tertullian accuses Marcion of Sinope, that he held that the Old Testament was a scandal to the faith, and accounted for it by postulating that Jehovah was a secondary deity, who was in God, who was God in a sense, but not the supreme God. He was just rigidly just. He had his good qualities, but he was also not the good God, who was the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, John Arenzin, back in 1909 in the Catholic Encyclopedia's 1913, which came out then. He mentions that the Eusebius accused Apelles, the 2nd century AD Gnostic, of considering the inspirer of Old Testament prophecies to be not a god but an evil angel. These writings commonly refer to the creator of the material world as a demiurgus, to distinguish him from the one true God. Now, some texts, such as the Apocryphon of John, and then the origin of the word, not only demonized the creator God, but also called him by the name of the devil in some Jewish writings, Samil. Now, in Islamic religion, the principle of evil is expressed by two terms referring to the same entity. Now, shaitan, meaning astray, distant, or double, and iblis. Iblis is the proper name of the devil, representing the characteristics of evil. Now, Iblis is often mentioned in the Quran narrative about the creation of humanity. When God created Adam, he ordered the angels to prostrate themselves before him, or prostrate themselves before him. Out of pride, Iblis refused and claimed to be superior to Adam. Now, therefore, pride, but also envy became a sign of unbelief in Islam. Now, therefore, Iblis was condemned to hell, but God granted him a request to lead humanity astray, knowing the righteous would resist Iblis's attempts to misguide them. Now, in Islamic religion, both good and evil are ultimately created by God, but since God's will is good, the evil and the world must be part of God's plan. Actually, God allowed the devil to seduce humanity. Evil and suffering are regarded as a test of a chance to prove confidence in God. Now, some philosophers and mystics emphasize Iblis himself as a role model of confidence in God. Now, because God ordered the angels to prostrate themselves, Iblis was forced to choose between Iblis was forced to choose between God's command and God's will, and not to praise someone other than God. He successfully passed the test, yet his disobedience caused his punishment and therefore suffering. However, he stays patient and rewarded in the end. Now, Muslims hold that the pre-Islamic jinn, tutelary deities, became subject under Islam to the judgment of God, and that those who did not submit to the law of God are devils. Now, although Iblis is often compared to the devil in Christian theology, Islam rejects the idea that Satan is an opponent of God and the implied struggle between good and evil. Iblis might either be regarded as the most monotheistic or the greater sinner, but remains only a creature of God. Now Iblis did not become an unbeliever due to his disobedience, but because of attributing injustice to God, that is, by asserting that the command to prostrate himself before Adam was inappropriate. There is no reference to angelic revolt in the Quran, and no mention of Iblis trying to take God's throne. And Iblis' sin could be forgiven at any time by God, but according to the Quran, Iblis' disobedience was due to his disdain for humanity, a narrative already occurring in early New Testament Apocrypha. Now, as in Christianity, Iblis was once a pious creature of God, but later cast out of heaven due to his pride. However, to maintain God's absolute sovereignty, Islam matches the line taken by Irenaeus instead of the later Christian consensus that the devil did not rebel against God but against humanity. Now, further, although Iblis is generally regarded as a real bodily entity, he plays a less significant role as the personification of evil than in Christianity. Iblis is merely a tempter, notable for inciting humans into sin by whispering into humans' minds, wastas, which is akin to the Jewish idea of the devil as Yatzer Hara. On the other hand, um, yeah, I gotta get my hair cut. On the other hand, Shaitan refers unilaterally to forces of evil, including the double Iblis who causes mischief. Shaitan is also linked to humans' psychological nature, appearing in dreams, causing anger, or interpreting the mental preparation for prayer. Now, furthermore, the term Shaitan also refers to beings who follow the double suggestion of Iblis. Also, the principle of Shaitan is in many ways a symbol of spiritual impurity, representing humans' own deficits in contrast to a true Muslim who is free from anger, lust, and other devilish desires. Um, Now, in Muslim culture, doubles are believed to be hermaphrodite creatures created from hellfire with one male and one female thigh, and they're able to procreate without a mate. It is generally believed that doubles can harm the souls of humans through their whisperings, while whisperings tempt humans into sin. The doubles might enter the hearth of an individual. If the doubles take over the soul of a person, this would render them aggressive or insane. Extreme cases, the alterings of the soul are believed to have effect on the body, matching its spiritual qualities. Um, Now, in contrast to Occidental philosophy, the Sufi ideal of seeing many as one and considering the creation in its essence as the absolute leads to the idea of the dissolution of any dualism between the ego of substance and the external substantial objects. Now, the rebellion against God mentioned in the Quran takes place on the level of the psyche that must be trained and disciplined for its union with the spirit that is pure. Um, since psyche drives the body, flesh is not the obstacle to humans, but rather an unawareness that allows the impulse forces to cause rebellion against God on the level of the psyche. Now, yet it is not, but yet it is not a dualism between body, psyche, and spirit, since the spirit embraces both psyche and corporeal aspects of humanity. Now, since the world is held to be the mirror in which God attributes are reflected, participation in worldly affairs is not necessarily seen as opposed to God. Um, Now, the devil activates the selfish desires of the psyche, leading the human astray from the divine. But thus, it is the eye that is regarded as evil, and both Iblis and Pharaoh are present as symbols for othering eye and one's own behavior. Now, therefore, it is recommended to use the term I as little as possible. It is only good. It is only God who has the right to say I, since it is only God who is self-subsistent. Othering I is therefore a way to compare oneself to God, regarded as shirk. Um, Now, many Salafi strands emphasize a dualistic worldview between believers and the unbelievers. The unbelievers are considered to be under the domain of the devil and are the enemies of the faithful. The former are credited with tempting the latter to sin away from God's path. The devil will ultimately be defeated by the power of God, but remains until then a serious threat for that believer. Um, Now, the rotation of substantial reality of evil are a form of dualism between God and the devil. It has no precedence in the Quran or earlier Muslim tradition. Um, the writings of Ibn Sina, Ghazali, and Ibn Taymiyyah, they all describe evil as the absence of good, rather than having any positive existence. Accordingly, infidelity among humans, civilizations, and empires are not described as evil or devilish in classical Islamic sources. Now, this is in stark contrast to Islamists such as Osama bin Laden, who justifies his violence against the infidels by contrary assertions. And Osama bin Laden was the piece of shit who was responsible for the attacks on 9/11. Um, Now, while in classical and hadith, doubles and jinn are responsible for ritual impurity, many Salafis substitute local demons by omnipresent threats through the devil himself. Only through remembrance of God and ritual purity can the devil be kept away. Um, as such, the devil becomes an increasingly powerful entity who is believed to interfere and to be is believed to interfere with both personal and political life. For example, many Salifos blame the devil for Western emancipation, and that actually is highlighted. So I would have to click on that and see what that's even referencing. Um, Now Yahweh, the God, and Judaism created both good and evil, as stated in Isaiah 45:7. For I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. The devil does not exist in Jewish scriptures, but Satan, who will later become a representative for the devil in Christian tradition, is not yet the devil, but the Hebrew term Satan, Hebrew meaning accuser or adversary, was applied to both human and heavenly adversaries. However, even when the term is referring to supernatural adversaries, such as in Numbers 22:22 and in Job 1-2, Satan is merely one of the sons of God and manifestation of God's will. Um, Now, under the influence of the Zoroastrianism during the Achaemenid Empire, which introduced the idea of evil as a separate principle into the Jewish belief system, Satan gradually developed into an independent principle, abolishing the Godhead from evil actions. In the Book of Jubilees, the angel, um, the evil angel Mastema, substitutes depreciated actions of Yahweh. Nonetheless, Mastema can only act with God's permission, and only succeeds then attacking only exceeds and attacking non-Jewish nations. Um, in the Book of Enoch, there is an entire class of angels called Satans. According to Jeffrey Burton Russell, Satan is just another name by Azazel, the leader of the rebel angel of the story. Um, Derek R. Brown argues here that the devil and the Satans are still distinct. While Azazel and his angels rebel against God, the Satans act on God's behalf as God's executioners of divine judgment. The fallen angels are blamed for introducing the forbidden arts of war into the world and sire demonic offspring with human women. By ascribing the origin of evil into angels acting from gods independently, evil is attributed to something supernatural from without, external to the prevailing belief system. Now, due to resemblance of the fallen angels with creatures of Greek mythology, the fallen angels might be a reaction invading Hellenistic culture, resulting in perceived oppression of the Jewish people. The story of fallen angels proposing a second independent power in heaven was at odds with later rabbinic Judaism. Therefore, the Book of Enoch, which depicted the evil as an independent force besides of God, were rejected after the apocalyptic period. References to Satan in the Tanakh are thought to be allegorical. Um, in Mandaeism and Mandaean mythology, Ruha fell apart from the world of light and became the queen of the world of darkness, also referred to as Sheol. She is considered evil and a liar and a sorcerer and a seductress. She gives birth to who's also referred to as Leviathan. He is portrayed as a large, ferocious dragon or snake, and he's considered to be the king of the world of darkness. Um, Together, they rule the underworld and create the 7 planets and 12 zodiac constellations. Also found in the underworld is Krun, the greatest of the 5 Mandaean lords of the underworld. He dwells in the lowest depths of creation and is an epithet as the mountain of flesh. Now, prominent infernal beings found in the world of darkness include Lilith, which is a vampire, Nauli, who's a hobgoblin, Lanabe, which is a devil, Godelta, which is a ghost, and Satani, which is another name for Satan, and various other demons and evil spirits. In Manichaeism, God and the devil are also two unrelated principles. Now, God created good and inhabits the realm of light, while the double, also called the Prince of Darkness, created evil and inhabits the kingdom of darkness. The contemporary world came into existence when the kingdom of darkness assaulted the kingdom of light and mingled with the spiritual world. At the end, the double and his followers will be sealed forever, and the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness will continue to coexist eternally and never to commingle again. Um, Hegemonius in 4th century CE accuses that the Persian prophet Mani, founder of the Manichaean sect in the 3rd century CE, identified Jehovah as the double God, which created the world, and said that he who spoke with Moses, the Jews, and the priests is the Prince of Darkness and not the God of Truth. Um, Yazidism. Dualism is rejected by the Yazidis. According to Yazidism, evil is non-existent, and there is no eternity that represents the evil in opposition to God. Yazidis adhere to strict monoism, and they are prohibited from uttering the word double and from speaking anything of anything related to hell in that religion. Um, Now, Zoroastrianism is probably introduced the first idea of the double, um, a principle of evil is independently existing apart from God. In Zoroastrianism, good and evil derive from two ultimately opposed forces. The force of good is called Ahura Mazda, and the destructive spirit in the Bestian language is called Angra Mainyu. The Middle Persian equivalent is so the Middle Persian equivalent is Abramin, and they are an eternal struggle, and the all powerful, especially as Angra Mainyu is limited to space and time. In the end of time, he will finally be defeated. But while Ahura Mazda creates what is good, Angra Mainyu is responsible for every evil and suffering in the world, such as toads and scorpions. Iranian Zoroastrians also consider the Deva as an evil creature. Because of this, the Shahnameh is mentioned as both a Riemann, Div, and Persian, meaning a double. Um, Now, a non-published manuscript of Spinoza's Ethics contained a chapter on the double, where Spinoza examined whether the double may exist or not. He defines the double as an entity which is contrary to God. However, if the double is the opposite of God, the double will consist of nothingness, which does not exist. Um, now, Now, in a paper called "On Doubles," he writes that we can probably find out that such a thing cannot exist, because the duration of a thing results in its degree of perfection, and the more essence a thing possesses, the more lasting it will be. And since the double has no perfection at all, it's impossible for the double to be an existing thing. Now, evil or immoral behavior in humans, such as anger, hate, envy, and all things for which the double is blamed for, could be explained without the proposal of a double. Now, thus, the double does not have any explanatory power. They can't really explain this power and should be dismissed in Occam's razor. Um, Now, regarding evil through free choice, Spinoza asks how it can be that Adam would have chosen sin over his own well-being. Um, yeah, my birthday was like 3 weeks ago. Um, yeah. So okay. So yes, one can ask, how could Adam have chosen sin over his own well-being? And that's because he was tricked by the serpent. Um, Now, theology traditionally responds to this by asserting that the devil who tempts humans into sin, but who would have tempted the devil? According to Spinoza, a rational being, such as the devil must have been, could not choose his own damnation. The devil must have known his own sin. Um, um, would have known his own sin would lead to doom. Thus, the devil was not knowing, or the devil did not know his sin would lead to any doom. Thus, the devil would not have been a rational being. Spinoza concluded a strict determinism in which moral agency as a free choice cannot exist. And Immanuel Kant, the devil found a way into a rational discourse through Immanuel Kant's personification of the idea of absolute egoism. Um, in a book that he wrote, In Religion Within the Limits of Reason Alone, Immanuel Kant uses the devil as the personification of maximum moral um, reprehensibility, deviating from the common Christian idea. Kant does not locate the morally reprehensible and sensual urges, since evil has to be intelligible, and only when the sensual is consciously placed above the moral obligation can something be regarded as morally evil. Um, thus to be evil, the devil must be able to comprehend morality, but also has to consciously reject it, and as a spiritual being, having no relation to any form of sensual pleasure, it is necessary. It is necessarily required for the devil to be a spiritual being, because if the devil were also a sensual being, it would be possible that the devil does evil to satisfy lower sensual desires, and does not act from the mind alone. The devil acts against morals, and not to satisfy sensual lust, but solely for the sake of evil. As such, the devil is unselfish, for he does not benefit from his evil deeds. Um, Now, however, Kant denies that a human being could ever be completely devilish, since a human does not act evil or the sake of evil itself. I guess he's never met Trump. For he is perceived as good, such as a law or self-love. Kant argues that despite that there are devilish vices ingratitude, envy, and malicious joy, i.e., vices that do not bring any personal advantage. However, the person cannot act for the sake of evil itself, and thus not to be considered a devil. In this lecture on his moral philosophy, Kant gives an example of a tulip seller who was in possession of a rare tulip, but when he learned that another seller had the same tulip, he brought it from him and then destroyed it instead of keeping it for himself. If he had acted according to his sensual urges, the seller would have kept the tulip for himself to make a profit, but not have destroyed it. Nevertheless, the destruction of the tulip cannot be completely absolved from sensual impulses, since the sensual joy or relief still accompanies the destruction of the tulip, and therefore cannot be thought of solely as a violation of morality. Kant further argues that a spiritual devil would be a self contradiction. If the devil would be defined by doing evil, the devil had no free choice in the first place. But if the devil had no free choice, the devil would not have been held accountable for his actions, since he had no free will, but was only following his nature. Um, Now we can close this one out. Okay, we can close that one out. I could coordinate this into since I was talking about him earlier. Um, I have two other videos I can put in with this. Um, Now Lucifer is a fallen angel, as I was talking about earlier, and the devil in Christian theology. Lucifer is associated with the sin of pride and believed to have and he was believed to have tried to have an attempt of usurpation of God, where after being banished, where he was banished to hell. Lucifer is one of the fallen angels. You can see this picture here. This is supposed to be Lucifer. Um, um, oh shit, fucker. Okay. Now the concept of a fallen angel attempting to overthrow the highest deity parallels Atur's attempt to overthrow Baal in Canaanite mythology, and he was thrown into the underworld as a result of his failure. The story is alluded to in Isaiah and transferred to Christian beliefs and is also used in the Vulgate, the late 4th century Latin translation of the Bible. Um, as the antagonists of God in Christian beliefs, some sects of Satanism began to venerate Lucifer as a bringer of freedom and other religious communities such as the Gnostics and Freemasons, and both of those have been accused of worshiping Lucifer as their deity without any evidence to that. Now, Lucifer is still a frequently recurring figure in popular media, like movies, books, stuff like that. In Roman folklore, Lucifer was which means light bringer in Latin, was the name of the planet Venus, although it was often personified as a male figure bearing a torch. The Greek name for this planet was variously Phosphorus, also meaning light bringer, or Heo Phosphorus, meaning or Heo Phosphorus, meaning dawn bringer. Um, Lucifer was said to be the fabled son of Aurora and Cephalus, and the father of Ceyx. He was often presented in poetry as heralding the dawn, a similar name used by the Roman poet Catullus for the planet and its evident aspect as Noctifer, meaning nightbringer. Um, and here's a picture of Lucifer, the morning star, represented as a winged child pouring lights from a jar. Um, and right here, where the three stars align, it's supposed to be planet Venus in alignment with Mercury above and the moon below. Um, so, now the Latin word corresponding to Greek phosphorus is Lucifer, but it's used in its astronomical sense both in prose and poetry, and poets sometimes personify the star, placing it in the mythological context. Um, okay. Now Lucifer's mother Aurora corresponds to goddesses in other cultures. The name Aurora is semantically akin to the name of the Vedic goddess Dinu, more directly cognate to E.g. Dawn, the daughter of King Dakska, and is cognate to the names of the Lithuanian goddess Azarine and one of the Greek goddesses Eos. Now all three beings are also the goddesses of dawn. All four are considered to be descended from the Proto-Indo-European stem, um, um, which is like dawn, a stem that also gave rise to Proto-Germanic Austro, and Old Germanic Austera, and Old English. And this agreement has led scholars to reconstruct a Proto-Indo-European dawn goddess. Now, in the second century Roman mythographer Hyginus said of the planet, the fourth star is that of Venus, Luciferus by name. Some say it is Juno's, but in many tales, it is recorded that it is called Hesperus too. It seems to be the largest of all stars. And some have said that it represents the son of Aurora and Cephalus, who surpassed Manny in beauty, so that he even vied with Venus, and as Arato, Athena said. Um, for this reason, it is called the star of Venus. It is visible both at dawn and at sunset, and so properly has been called both Luciferus and Hesperus. Now, the Latin poet Ovid, in his first century epic Metamorphosis, describes Lucifer as ordering the heavens. Aurora, watchful in the reddening dawn, threw wide her crimson doors and rose-filled halls the stelae took flight and marshaled orders set by Lucifer for who left his station last. Um, Now, Obed, speaking of Phosphorus and Hesperus, the evening star, and the evening appearance of the planet Venus as identical, makes him the father of Dalian. Obed also marks him as the father of Cx, while also the Latin grammarian Servius makes him the father of the Hesperidius or of Hesperius. Um, in the classical Roman period, Lucifer was not typically regarded as a deity and had few, if any, myths. Although the planet was associated with, even though the planet was associated with various deities and often poetically personified, Cicero stated that you say that Sol and Luna are deities, and the Greeks identified the form with Apollo and the latter with Diana. Um, but if Luna is a goddess, then Lucifer, the morning star, also, and the rest of the wandering stars will also have to be counted as gods. And if so, then the fixed stars as well. Um, Now, the motif of a heavenly being striving for the highest seat of heaven, only to be cast down to the underworld, has its origins in the motions of the planet Venus, known as the morning star. A similar theme is present in the Babylonian myth of Etana. The Jewish encyclopedia comments that the brilliancy of the morning star, which eclipses all other stars but is not seen during the night, may easily have given rise to such a myth, as was told of Athena, um, or of Athena and Zeus. He was led by his pride to strive for the highest seat among the star gods on the northern mountains of the gods, but was hurled down by the supreme ruler of the Babylonian Olympus. Um, Now, the fall from heaven motif also has a parallel in Canaanite mythology. In ancient Canaanite religion, the morning star is personified as the god who attempted to occupy the throne of Baal, and finding that he was unable to do so, and descended and ruled, and he descended and ruled the underworld. The original myth may have been about the lesser god Halil trying to dethrone the Canaanite high god El, who lived on a mountain to the north. Hermann Gunkel's reconstruction of the myth told of a mighty warrior called Halal, whose ambition was to ascend higher than all other stellar divinites. um, um, but he had to descend to the dust of if thus portrayed as a battle, the process by which the bright morning star fails to reach the highest point in the sky before being faded out by the rising sun. The Jewish tradition echoes Jewish pseudo piographa such as Enoch II and the life of Adam and Eve. The life of Adam and Eve in turn shaped the idea of Iblis in the Quran. And yes, I am Jewish, but I've never read the Bible for like the Jewish stuff. At least on that portion, anyway. In the Bible and Christianity, basically, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, the king of Babylon is condemned in a prophetic vision by the prophet Isaiah, and is called for shining for the and is called Helen Ben, which is Hebrew for shining one of the morning, who was addressed as Halil ben Halil ben Sahar. The title Halil ben Sahar refers to the planet Venus as the morning star, and that is how the Hebrew word is usually interpreted. Now the Hebrew word transliterated as Halil or Halel occurs only once in the Hebrew Bible. Now the Septuagint renders in Greek as Helios Phosphorus, which means bringer of dawn. The ancient Greek name for the morning star. Similarly, the Vulgate renders in Latin as Lucifer the name in that language for the morning star. According to the King James Bible, they based Strong's concordance. The original Hebrew word means shining one, light bearer, and the English translation given in the King James text is the Latin name for the planet Venus, Lucifer, as it was already in the Wycliffe Bible. Um, and here's supposed to be Lucifer carved out of stone. Um, right there. Um, Now, however, throughout the years, the translation of Lucifer has been abandoned in modern English translations of Isaiah 14:12. Present-day translations render the Morning Star and New International Version, New Century Version, New American Standard Bible, the Good News Translation, the Holman Christian Standard Bible, Contemporary English Version, Common English Bible, the Complete Jewish Bible, Daystar and the New Jerusalem Bible and the Message, and Daystar in the New Revised Standard Version, English Standard Version, Shining One, New Life Version, New World Translation, or the JPS Tanaka, or Shining Star in the New Living Translation. The most common Bible that people read is the King James Version. Um, Now, in modern translation from the original Hebrew, the passage in which the phrase Lucifer or morning star occurs begins with this statement: On the day the Lord gives you relief from your suffering and turmoil, and from the harsh labor forced on you, you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. However, the oppressor has come to an end, and how his fury has ended. After describing the death of the king, the taunt continues: How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn! You have been cast down to the earth. You who once laid low the nations, you said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God, and I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zion. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, and to the depths of the pit. And those who see you stare at you. They ponder your fate. Is this the man who shook the earth and made kingdoms tremble, the man who made the world a wilderness, who overthrew its cities and would not let his captives go home? Um, now for the unnamed king of Babylon, a wide range of identifications have been proposed, and they include a Babylonian ruler of the prophet Isaiah's own time. Later, Nebuchadnezzar II, under whom the Babylonian captivity of the Jews began, Nabonidus, and the Assyrian kings Tiglath-Pileser, Sargon II, and Sennacherib. Verse 20 says that this king of Babylon will not be joined with them, all the kings of the nations in burial, because thou hast destroyed thy land, thou hast slain thy people. The seed of evildoers shall not be named forever, but rather be cast out of the grave, while all the kings of the nations, all of them, sleep in glory. Um, Everyone in his own house. Herbert Wolf held that the king of Babylon was not a specific ruler, but a generic representation of the whole line of rulers. Isaiah 14:12 became a source for the popular conception of the fallen angel motif. Rabbinic Judaism has rejected any belief in rebel or fallen angels. In the 11th century, the Perkai de Rabbi Eliezer illustrates that the origin of the fallen angel myth be given two accounts. One relates to the angel in the Garden of Eden who seduces Eve, and the other relates to the angels, the Benai Elohim, who cohabit with the daughters of man, in Genesis 6:1-4. An association of Isaiah 14:12-18 with the personification of evil, called the devil, developed outside of the mainstream rabbinic Judaism and pseudo-pyographia, and later in Christian writings, particularly with the Apocalypse. Now, the metaphor of the morning star that Isaiah 14:12 applied to a king of Babylon gave rise to the general use of the Latin word for morning star, and capitalized as the original name of the devil before his fall from grace. Linking Isaiah 14:12 with Luke 10, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven, and interpreting the passage in Isaiah as an allegory of Satan's fall from heaven. Considering pride as a major sin peak in self-deprecation. Lucifer became the template for the double. As a result, Lucifer was identified with the double in Christian popular literature, as in Dante's Inferno, um, and Juice Hall's Lucifer and John Milton's Paradise Lost. Early medieval Christianity fairly distinguished between Lucifer and Satan. While Lucifer as the double is fixated in hell, Satan executes the desires of Lucifer as his vassal. Um, so when it comes to Aquila of Sinope, Aquila of Sinope derives the word Hillel, the Hebrew name for the morning star, from the verb yawel, which means to lament. Um, um, so Now this derivation was adopted as a proper name for an angel who laments the loss of his former beauty. The Christian church parlors, for example, like Jerome, in his Vulgate, translated this as Lucifer. Um, if you don't know, Jerome was a saint, and also he was an early Christian priest, confessor, theologian, translator, and historian, who's commonly known as Saint Jerome. Um, some Christian writers have applied the name Lucifer as used in the book of Isaiah and the motif of heavenly being cast down on earth, to the word devil. Now, Sigrid K. Tonstad argues that the New Testament war in heaven, and the heaven theme of Revelation 12, in which the dragon who was called the devil and Satan was thrown down to the earth, was derived from the passage about the Babylonian king in Isaiah 14. Origen interpreted such Old Testament passages as being about manifestations of the devil. Um, Origen was not the first to interpret the Isaiah 14 passage as referring to the devil, but he was preceded by at least Tertullian, who in his Adversus Marcionum, Book 5, chapters 11 and 17, and twice presents as spoken by the devil in the words of Isaiah 14:14. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Though Tertullian was a speaker of the language in which the world was created, Lucifer is not among the numerous names and phrases he used to describe the devil. But even at the time of Augustine of Hippo, a contemporary of the composition of the Vulgate, Lucifer had not yet become a common name for the devil yet. Um, now Augustine's work, Civitas Dei, which was in the 5th century, became the major opinion of Western demonology, including in the Catholic Church. Now, for Augustine, the rebellion of the devil was the first and final cause of evil. Now, by this, he rejected some earlier teachings about Satan having fallen when the world was already created. Now, further, Augustine rejects the idea that envy could have been the first sin, as some early Christians believed, evident from sources like the Cave of Treasures, in which Satan has fallen because he envies humans and refused to prostrate himself before Adam. Um, and since pride, meaning loving yourself more than others and God, is required to be envious, hatred for the happiness of others, he argues that evil came first into existence by the free will of Satan. His attempt to take God's throne is not an assault on the gates of heaven, but a turn into solipsism, in which the devil becomes God in the world, in his world. But when the king of Babylon uttered his phrase in Isaiah, he was speaking through the sprite of Lucifer, the head of devils. He concluded that everyone who falls away from God are within the body of Lucifer and is a devil. Um, adherents of the King James only movement and others who hold that Isaiah 14:12 does indeed refer to the devil, but they have decried the modern translations. Now, an opposing view attributes to a region the first identification of the Lucifer of Isaiah 14:12 with the double and to Tertullian and Augustine of Hippo. They spread the story of Lucifer as fallen through pride and envy of God and jealousy of humans because he was jealous of humans anyway. Um, Now, the 1409 Lollard manuscript titled Lantern of Light associated with Lucifer, they associated Lucifer with the deadly sin of pride, um, and their seven deadly sins, and pride is one of them. Um, you got pride, lust, gluttony, greed, envy, hate, stuff that Trump embodies. Trump has all seven deadly sins, but we're not really talking about him on this video. Now, Protestant theologian John Calvin rejected the identification of Lucifer with Satan or the devil, and he said the exposition of this passage, which some have given, as if it referred to Satan. He has arisen from ignorance, for the context plainly shows these statements must be understood in reference to the king of the Babylonians. Now, Martin Luther also considered it a gross error to refer this verse to the devil. Now, Counter-Reformation writes like Albertanius of Brescia, classified the seven deadly sins each to a specific biblical demon. He as well as Peter Binsfield assigned Lucifer to the sin of pride. Um, so now, since Lucifer's sin mainly consists of self deification, some Gnostic sects identify Lucifer with the creator deity in the Old Testament. In the Bogomil and Cathar text Gospel of the Secret Supper, Lucifer is glorified as a fallen angel, but fell from the heaven to establish his own kingdom and became the Demiurge, who created the material world and trapped souls from heaven inside matter. Jesus descended into earth to free the captured souls. In contrast to mainstream Christianity, the cross was denounced as a symbol of Lucifer and his instrument in an attempt to kill Jesus. Latter-day Saints basically refers to the Mormon religion. Lucifer is regarded within the Latter-day Saint movement as the pre-mortal name for the devil. Latter-day Saint theology teaches that in a heavenly council, Lucifer rebelled against the plan of God the Father and was subsequently cast out. The doctrine and covenant reads, this we saw also and bear record that an angel of God who was in authority in the presence of God, who rebelled against the only begotten Son, whom the Father loved and who was in the bosom of the Father, was thrust down from the presence of God and the Son, and was called perdition. For the heavens wept over him. He was Lucifer, the son of the morning, and we beheld, and lo, he is fallen, and fallen even the son of the morning. And while we were yet in the spirit against the Lord, commanded us that we should write the vision. For we beheld Satan, that old serpent, even the devil, who rebelled against God and sought to take the kingdom of our God and his Christ. Wherefore he maketh war with the saints of God and encompass them around about. So after becoming Satan by his fall, Lucifer goeth up and down to and fro on the earth, seeking to destroy the souls of men. And members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints consider Isaiah 14:12 to be referring to both the king of the Babylonians and the devil. And yes, they do have a satanic Bible. I've never read it, don't care to. Luciferianism is a belief structure that venerates the fundamental traits that are attributed to Lucifer. The custom usually reverses Lucifer not as the devil. Okay, so they revere Lucifer not as the devil, but as a savior, a guardian or instructing spirit, or even the true God as opposed to Jehovah. Um, Now, in Levian Satanism, Lucifer is described by the Satanic Bible as one of the four crown princes of hell, particularly that of the East, the Lord of the Air, and is called the bringer of light, the morning star, intellectualism, and enlightenment. Um, Rudolf Steiner's writings, which form the basis of anthroposophy, characterize Lucifer as a spiritual opposite to Arium, with Christ between the two forces mediating a balanced path for humanity. Lucifer represents an intellectual, imaginative, delusional, otherworldly force which might be associated with visions, subjectivity, psychosis, and fantasy. Now, he associated Lucifer with the religious, philosophical cultures of Egypt, Rome, and Greece. Now, Rudolf Steiner believed that Lucifer, as a supersensible being, had incarnated in China about 3,000 years before the birth of Christ. Um, Leo Taxel claimed that Freemasonry is associated with worship of Lucifer, and what is known as the Taxel hoax. He alleged that leading Freemason Albert Pike had addressed the 23 Supreme Confederate Councils of the world, and then an invention of Taxiel instructed them that Lucifer was God and was opposition to the evil god Adonai, basically. Taxiel promoted a book by Diana Vaughn, actually written by Taxiel, as he later confessed publicly, that purported to reveal a highly secret ruling body called the Palladium, which controlled the organization and had a satanic agenda as described by Freemasonry, disclosed in 1897. Um, Now, with frightening cynicism, the miserable person, we shall not name here, Taxel declared that before an assembly especially convened for him, that for 12 years he had prepared and carried out to the end the most sacrilegious of hoaxes, and we have always been careful to publish special articles concerning Palladianism and Diana Vaughn, who we are now given in this issue a complete list of these articles, which can now be considered as not having existed at all. Now the people that support Freemasonry assert that when Albert Pike and other Masonic scholars spoke about the Luciferian path, or the energies of Lucifer, they were referring to the morning star, the light bearer, the search for light, the very antithesis of dark. Pike says in Morals and Dogma, Lucifer, the son of the morning, it is he who bears the light, and with the splendors intolerable blinds feeble, sensual or selfish souls. Doubt it not. Much has been made of this quote. Um, Taxel's work and Pike's address continued to be quoted by anti-Masonic groups. Um, in Devil Worship in France, Arthur Edward Waite compared Taxel's work to today's tabloid journalism, replete with logical and factual inconsistencies. Now, Charles Godfrey Leland, in the collection of folklore and magical practices supposedly supposedly collected in Italy by Charles Godfrey Leland and published in his Aradia, or the Gospel of the Witches, the figure of Lucifer is featured prominently as both the brother and consort of the goddess Diana and father of Arcadia, or Aradia, sorry. Um, the center of an alleged Italian witch cult. In Leland's mythology, Diana pursued her brother Lucifer across the sky as a cat pursues a mouse. According to Leland, after dividing herself into light and darkness, Diana saw that the light was so beautiful, and the light which was her other half, her brother Lucifer, she yearned for it with exceedingly great desire, wishing to receive the light again into her darkness, to swallow it up to rapture, and delight she trembles with desire. The desire was the dawn, but Lucifer, the light, fled from her and would not yield to her wishes. He was the light He was the light which flies into the most distant parts of heaven, the mouse which flies before the cat. Um, Now here the motions of Diana and Lucifer once again mirror the celestial motions of the moon and Venus respectively. Now, even though Leland's Lucifer is based on the classical personification of the planet Venus, he also incorporates elements from Christian tradition as in the following passage. Diana greatly loved her brother Lucifer, the god of the sun and of the moon, and the god of the light splendor, who was so proud of his beauty, and for who his pride was driven from paradise. Um, and the several modern Wicca traditions based in parts on Leland's work, the figure of Lucifer is usually either omitted or replaced as Diana's consort with either the Etruscan god Tagni or Janus, following the work and folklorist James Fraser in The Golden Bough. Um, Now, in the modern popular culture, Lucifer is often depicted as charismatic, complex, and sometimes sympathetic figure rather than purely evil being. He is frequently portrayed as a fallen angel with a rebellious streak and may be intelligent, witty, and even morally conflicted. Now, if you ever seen the show Supernatural, Lucifer is the main antagonist of the fifth season. The conflict between the good and evil angels is portrayed as a conflict between brothers. Despite being the villain in the story, he is held in high regards that the antagonistic deities. As Lucifer defeats the pagan gods alone in one episode, his background story further adds to his moral ambiguity. Um, his evil motivations are said to stem from his love to God. When God shows love for humanity and orders the angels to bow before them, Lucifer refuses because he could only love God. His depictions are inspired by the Islamic traditions about Iblis and Satan as a son of God and Bogomilism. Um, um, notable examples include the television series Lucifer, where he is a suave nightclub owner who rebelled against his Lord Father and abandoned his role as Hell's warden, and the Sandman comics, which represent him as a defined ruler of Hell, seeking independence, and both stem from the DC Comics interpretation of the religious figure. Now, these portrayals emphasize his free will, disdain for authority, and struggle with his identity, often blending elements of myth, theology, and contemporary storytelling. Um, Now, okay, now we're getting on to about Satan, and this one's not particularly a long one, but I'll still throw it in. Now, Satan, also known as the devil, is an entity in Abrahamic religions who seduces humans into sin or falsehood. In Judaism, Satan is seen as an agent subservient to God, typically regarded as a metaphor for the Yetzer Hara, or evil inclination. Um, in Christianity and Islam, he is usually seen as the fallen angel or jinn who has rebelled against God, who nevertheless um, allows him temporary power over the fallen world and a host of demons. In the Quran, Iblis, the leader of the devils, is made of the fire and was cast out of heaven because he refused to bow before the newly created Adam, and he incites humans into sin by infecting their minds with evil suggestions. Um, a figure known as Ha-Satan, or also known as the Satan, first appears in the Hebrew Bible as a heavenly prosecutor subordinate to Yahweh, meaning God. He prosecutes the nation of Judah in the heavenly court and tests the loyalty of Yahweh's followers. Now, during the intertestamental period, possibly due to influence from the Zoroastrian figure of Angra Mainyu, Satan developed into a malevolent entity with abhorrent qualities and dualistic opposition to God. In the apocryphal Book of Jubilees, Yahweh grants to Satan, referred to as Mastema, authority over a group of fallen angels or their offspring to tempt humans into sin and punish them. Now, even though the Book of Genesis does not name him specifically, Christians often identify the serpent in the Garden of Evil as Satan, in the Garden of Eden as Satan. Um, in the Synoptic Gospel, Satan tempts Jesus in the desert and is identified as the cause of illness and temptation. In the Book of Revelation, Satan appears as a great red dragon who is defeated by Michael the archangel and cast down from heaven. He is later bound for 1,000 years, but is briefly set free before being ultimately defeated and cast into the lake of fire. Uh, in the Middle Ages, Satan played a minimal role in Christian theology and was used as a comic relief figure in mystery plays. During the early modern period, Satan's significance greatly increased as beliefs such as demonic possession and witchcraft became more prevalent. During the Age of Enlightenment, belief in the existence of Satan was harshly criticized by thinkers such as Voltaire. Nonetheless, belief in Satan has persisted, particularly in America. Now, although Satan is generally viewed as evil, some groups have very different beliefs. In theistic Satanism, Satan is considered a deity who is either worshipped or revered. In Levian Satanism, Satan is a symbol of virtuous characteristics and liberty. Satan's appearance is never described in the Bible, but since the 9th century, he has often been shown in Christian arts with horns, cloven hooves, usually unusually hairy legs, and a tail, often naked and holding a pitchfork. Um, these are an amalgam of traits derived from various pagan deities, including Pan, Poseidon, and Bes. Satan appears frequently in Christian literature, most notably in Dante's Inferno, all variants of the classic false story, John Milton's Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained, and the poems of William Blake. He continues to appear in literature, film, television, video games, and music. Now, the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew term Satan is a generic noun meaning accuser or adversary and is derived from a verb meaning primarily to obstruct or to oppose. In the early biblical books, like e.g. 1 Samuel 29:4, the term refers to human adversaries, but in the later books, especially Job 1-2 and Zechariah 3, to a supernatural entity. When used without the definite article simply saying, it can refer to any accuser, but when it is used with the definite article Satan, it usually refers specifically to the heavenly accuser, literally the Satan. Now, the word does not occur in the Book of Genesis, which only mentions a talking serpent, and it does not identify the serpent with any supernatural entity. But the first occurrence of the word Satan in the Hebrew Bible is a reference to supernatural figure which comes up in the Numbers 22:22, which describes the angel of Yahweh confronting Balaam on his donkey. Balaam's departure aroused the wrath of Elohim, and the angel of Yahweh stood in the road as a Satan against him. Now, if you want to see a picture of what Satan's supposed to look like, this is supposed to be the illustration of Satan. Okay, so some passages may refer to the Satan without using a direct word itself. In the first book of Samuel 2:12, it describes the sons of Eli as the son of Belial. The name Belial may be a synonym for Satan, although elsewhere in the Bible, Belial is a word meaning worthlessness, and the phrase "sons of Belial" is translated to "worthless fellows." In the first book of Samuel 16:14 through 23, Yahweh sends a troubling spirit to torment the king's soul as a mechanism to ingratiate David with the king. In the first book of Kings 22:19 through 25, um, the prophet Micaiah describes to King Ahab a vision of Yahweh sitting on his throne surrounded by the host of heaven. Yahweh asks the host which of them will lead Ahab astray. Now, a spirit is not as a spirit whose name is not specified, but who is analogous to the Satan, volunteers to be a lion spirit within the mouth of all the prophets. Um, Now, Satan appears in the Book of Job, a poetic dialogue set within with a prose framework, basically which may have been written around the time of the Babylonian captivity. But in the text, Job was a righteous man who was favored by God. Job 1:6-8 describes the sons of God presenting themselves before Yahweh. Um, Yahweh asks one of them, the Satan, where has he been? To which he replies that he's been roaming around the earth. Yahweh asks, have you considered my servant Job? The Satan replies by urging Yahweh to let him torture Job, promising that Job will abandon his faith at the first tribulation. And Yahweh consents. The Satan destroys Job's servants and flocks, yet Job refuses to condemn Yahweh. The first scene repeats itself with the Satan presenting himself to Yahweh alongside the other sons of God. Yahweh points out Job's continued faithfulness, to which the Satan insists that more testing is necessary. Um, now in the end, Job remains faithful and righteous, and it is implied that Satan is pissed off about his defeat. Um, Now, most Jewish people do not believe in the existence of a supernatural, malevolent spirit figure, but traditionalists and philosophers in medieval Judaism adhered to a rational theology, rejecting any belief in rebel or fallen angels and viewing evil as abstract. Um, Now, when it comes to Satan, the most common English synonym for Satan is the word double, which people have always referred to him as, and it descends from the Middle English double from Old English defold, that in turn represents an early Germanic borrowing of Latin. That's about all for today. Next week, you guys can tune in to me while I put up a video about the sirens next week. Somebody sent me that one. They wanted me to do a video on the sirens, which is Greek mythology. So tune in next week if you want to watch that one. If you want to watch the live stream on that one. Thanks for all the people that tuned in. Just ignore a couple of the unemployed trolls that are on here. Now, if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, Rushing the King, for more videos like this. And make sure, and you guys can leave comments, and everything like that. But tune in next week for the sirens, when I post that up on the next weekend.